Hi, I'm Buddy Cook, and today I want to talk to you about this. That's right, DCI has put out the 2020 rules changes, proposed rules changes that are going to get considered here at a meeting in the next couple weeks. I do want to emphasize these are just proposals, and there's still a process where they have to go forward and a panel looks at them and then they go forward for vote. And that doesn't mean these are adopted yet. These aren't changes that are necessarily happening, but these are the proposals that are on the slate to get talked about at least. So let's go through and see what they all are. All right, first one here, brass amplification limitations, okay? Now, this is really about microphones for individual soloists, okay? And that they want that to not be for ensemble reinforcement, all right? So we're still gonna allow soloists, small groups, small number of feature musicians to be microphoned and with sound amplification. That's still allowed, but what they want to do is avoid using those microphones to then amplify an entire ensemble piece. The entire brass line is playing something together and we're putting that through the sound system. So that's what they want to avoid with this rule. Probably not a bad thing if you're going to allow amplification in the first place. All right, next up we got some innovation in how evaluation of the cores happen. All right, this is pretty innovative, and the whole point is that they want to maximize fan engagement in the feedback system. Now, I want to say this is only a proposal for a 4-week pilot test in June and July. All right, so they're not even proposing doing this as a massive shift, just to try it out. And the idea here is that on Monday and Tuesday events, the ranking would be only coming out of fan voting. No scores, no judge information. And then on Wednesdays and Thursdays, cores would still get ranked by fan voting, but they would also receive judges' feedback sheets, but no record scores would happen. And then on Friday and Sunday events, there'd be no fan input. They'd only get judges' feedback, and those would be the judges' scores that would determine what goes into the scoring system. So, okay, it's kind of innovative, and they talk about using either an app or the DCI websites that fans could vote on who their favorite core was. Okay, so that's an interesting take on it. We'll see how that goes. All right, the color sheet. Now they're looking at how we do judging for the guards. And what it talks about is including a mix of skills and big picture on the guard sheet, and saying that the current guard sheet is too focused on those individual color guard skills and not enough of the big picture. How does it fit in with the ensemble? But the thing I find interesting is when you read it, you got this quote here that DCI has a very small pool of judges that are expert at evaluating those skills. So opening the sheet up to include the big picture makes the sheet more accessible to more of the judging community. Now, to me, that kind of says you really need to be looking at, well, how do we train more judges to be skilled in evaluating the guards? Not, well, let's just, take some of that away and add something else in that anybody in the judging community could judge. But then you have the problem of, okay, great, so those judges who can't assess skills are going to be able to do that portion of the sheet, but there's still a skills portion of the sheet. So you're bringing in these new judges that you're saying don't have the ability to evaluate skills, but skills is still part of the scoring system. That doesn't sound right. I really think this needs to be looking at how do we do more training and bring in more judges with the kinds of evaluation skills that we need. All right, allowing for live sampling created in real time. So this is kind of an interesting one. What they're talking about is allowing effects like delay and looping to be used with the live performers. Now, it would still allow pre-recorded sequence music, which is currently a thing. But this would allow a live performer to play into the microphone and then to have electronic systems put in delays and loopings and whatnot to get electronic effects that originate with the microphone coming from a large performer. I think that makes sense. If you're going to allow the electronics, if you're going to allow it recorded, then why can't I actually do a live thing with it? And part of their point here is the educational aspect of, hey, in the real world, outside of DCI, if you go onto stages and all kinds of performances that are happening, these are effects that live performers do. So let the student performers have an experience and some educational opportunity of working with that and learning, what is it like to play live and have your own audio come back on a delay or looped after you've played it. So that's that's probably a good thing if you're going to be allowing recording. Why wouldn't you let live happen? All right, a rules system task force voted on by memberships. This is about how the rules systems work. All right now, currently the task force that puts together some of those rules things is appointed by the artistic director. So what they want to change this to is that every 3 years, the member corps would be able to nominate and then vote on who is on that task force. Now, the artistic director and the judge administrator would still remain on that and chair the task force, but it would allow the member corps to have more input into how those rules are made and who's in charge of making those rules. Not really a bad idea. That's a pretty interesting one there. All right, an update to the scoring system. Wow, and man, they mean update. So they're talking about 6 judges, all of them in the stands, no judges on the fields. Now of those 6, there's 2 for general effect, 2 visual, and 2 for music. And then those 2 each have specific things. For instance, the music, there's 1 for brass and 1 for percussion. Visual, there's 1 specifically for the color guard, and then there's 1 for the rest. And what they're pointing out with this is that it's really about safety of the judges. So we don't have judges on the field that have to worry about tripping over something, especially with all of the changes that have happened in the way that drum corps shows are put together compared to how they used to be in the past. Corps are moving a lot faster on the field. We've got more props. We've got huge stage structures that are out there. It's not just an open football field anymore. So getting the judges off the field so they can focus just on what they're seeing in the performance and not be worried about what am I going to trip over. The other part of this update then is to make the criteria for each of those judges not only look at their little slice of it, but to also have a portion that looks at how does their slice integrate with the bigger picture, right? So not just how does the color guard performance look in as a color guard performance, but how does it work together with the music? How does it work together with the drill that's going on in the field show to bring that all together? It's just kind of a way of putting general effect across the whole thing. But I guess you could look at it, how does my component, if I'm evaluating one of them, if I'm a judge, integrate, doing to add to that, not just the general effect itself, but how is the brass section adding to that and integrating together as part of a larger group? Probably a good thing, at least that portion. All right, sound reinforcement limits. And this is all about putting a decibel limit on the sound in the stadium venue. And it's all about hearing protection. And that's a good thing. We should be worried about hearing protection. Now, some people have looked at this, and the way I read what it's saying, it's only talking about the electronic amplified sound that's coming through speaker systems. It doesn't sound like it's actually aimed at putting a cap on the live performers from the drum line and the pit or the horn line. And this is all about hearing protection. Now, in my professional life, I've done some work that was dealing with sound safety and these kind of things, so I've got a little bit of background in it. And my issue here is there was about 6 pages of write-up that went along with this proposal talking about all those things. I'm not sure it's fully understanding the realities of it, because it's pointing out a lot of these OSHA limits, right? So if you're exposed to a certain sound level, 100 dB, whatever, if you're, there's 30-minute time limits on that before we have risks of hearing damage. Or as that goes up, it goes lower. I mean, you can get high enough to have like a 5-minute per day limit. But I think what it kind of misses is that when we're looking at OSHA standards, we've got to remember those are occupational safety risk decisions. All right, so those assumptions, when they say, hey, you shouldn't be exposed to a certain sound for more than 60 minutes or more than 30 minutes, the underlying assumption is that that's a job function. That's a job exposure, that you're going to expose today and you'll be exposed again tomorrow and the day after, and you're going to do that for a whole career, year after year, every single day. It's not a sound limit for you went out and got exposed to that today, and maybe in a couple weeks you'll go do it again. Now, there are safety standards that are based around one-time exposures, and there are limits for in a single setting, and it doesn't matter what happens the next day. But you got to be real careful about how you interpret some of those things, especially with occupational safety limits that aren't really designed for, I'm doing this on the one weekend. Now, that being said, when we're actually talking about the staff, the staff and the members of the corps, or if you've got judges that are there all week long and they do it for an entire season, okay, that is an occupational type exposure where I'm going to be in the band room practicing today, and tomorrow we're in the band room again, the next day we're out on the field, and then we're in the band room, and then we're going to be performing in a venue, and that's an everyday kind of thing. So then maybe those kind of things come up, but this really seems to be focused at the audience. Now, what is the proposal? The proposal is to have a 95 to 105 dB limit in large venues and an 85 to 95 dB in other venues. I think what they're looking at is, well, where are the judges sitting and expecting the sound to be optimized for the judges? So they'd be a little bit higher up in a bigger venue, and therefore you would need a little more sound. But if they're lower down, we don't need to be blaring out sound that was designed for a big venue at an audience that's much closer. And then they're talking about point penalties to enforce this if you exceed it. Now, I do think that there's some issues with the technicalities of really how would you do this on a practical level to be able to record that. There's a lot of things about how sound dissipates over distance and where exactly you're going to record this, and how do we keep it all fair? How does the Corps know? Those kind of things come into play. Now, there was a quote in there about there's no need to go over 110 decibels. Well, you can find these charts that talk about decibel levels, and they usually use things like a jackhammer, construction equipment, jet engine on a runway, gunfire, things like that. But honestly, a lot of people aren't exposed to them. We just kind of know that they're loud. But most of those higher sounds we're not really into every day. But we got to look at, hey, a normal concert venue, you're already talking 110, 120 decibels. So that's kind of where we're talking about. You're exposed to that anyway if you're going to these kind of things. Just give a concert. 120 dB is a pretty standard band room if you're in rehearsal in concert band, let's say, and all through school, which is an issue for music educators. So we got to think about where those are. Now, the reason I bring that out is, well, if we limit the sound that's coming out of the speaker system to, let's say, 90 decibels, and I got a horn line that's playing at 120, that then limits my ability to mix those sounds properly. Now, maybe I got to tell the horn line to play a little bit lower or whatever, and now we get into a whole discussion about the issues of the power that is the drum chord genre versus, and then we get into a whole G and B flat thing that goes along with that. But, that's part of this, of how are we going to mix the sound that's coming through a recorded system or an amplified system if the original sound is already higher than that, and can we get there? So, that might take some looking at really, well, where are we already? And is this really where the issue is? All right, but as a safety thing, not a bad concept, but a lot of practical aspects to get worked out. All right, now let's get down to the big one. Hold on to your hats. It's the any instrument policy. That's right out of the DCI Board of Directors, not any of the member corps. Allow the use of any instrument, including woodwinds, acoustic strings, etc., effective for the 2021 season. Wow. Okay. Now, the whole argument behind this is making DCI accessible to the excluded performers that currently can't join, right? So if you're a woodwind player, you just can't even join a DCI drum corps unless you learn a new instrument. And there's a lot of talk about, I've heard talk of people doing that kind of thing. Now, the proposal does acknowledge that there is, quote, a subset of the current audience will react negatively. You think? People are still upset and talking about moving from G only to B flat brass instruments, and then, or really not just B flat, but any key instruments. Now you're going to open it up to woodwind, strings, and just any instrumentation at all. I think some people are going to be upset. Now, but part of that is what they're hoping for is that they're going to get a larger audience base. So as much as some of the current fans are going to be upset by this, that will be outweighed by all of the new fans that come in, because now potentially woodwind players that never cared about DCI before can go, hey, yeah, that's interesting because it relates to them too, and they'll become fans. And then all these woodwind players that join will bring along their family, their friends that will become fans. So it gives you a larger audience base. And the proposal also talks about, well, look, I mean, people might be upset at first, but once the corps start experimenting with it and people see, hey, there's some great things going on there, that they'll kind of grow to like it and accept it. I'm not really sure how good a thing that is, but okay. That's how it's going. Now, why exactly are they proposing this, though, right? And they lay out a purpose here, and there's kind of two big key points that go along with this, right? The first one I thought was interesting was that they point to the DCI mission, which is about, bringing enjoyment of marching music, performing arts to more people worldwide. And I just think that's interesting that the mission statement is actually stated as marching music, not as drum and bugle corps. right there in the DCI mission. And there's really no mention when I look through like the bylaws until you get down to the point that the membership is open to drum corps. Now, if you start saying, well, what's a drum corps? Because that's not really defined. And if it can just be, well, any musical organization with any set of instruments, it's like, well, is that really a drum corps then? I mean, if I had a club and I said it's open to, all humans, right? But then if I want to expand the definition of humans to be, well, it's not just Homo sapiens, anything in the Homo genus, okay, I might be okay with that. And if you say, well, we're going to expand it to any primate, be like, okay, I'm not sure that they're really all human, but all right. But when you turn around and say that your definition of human is any multicellular life form, I think that might raise a little bit of question about, well, can I really be a member then? Does that really make sense? But that's kind of what they're doing here, because then it's going to be, well, membership's open to drum corps, and a drum corps is any musical organization with any set of instruments, even if they don't have any drums, don't have any bugles. So, the string philharmonic is going to show up, and that's a drum corps. All right. The second thing, though, that I noticed in this purpose statement is DCI and individual corps could leverage revenue opportunities presented by an entirely new target audience. I think this might be one of the main things that's going on here, right? And even in the fiscal impact, it talks about leveraging revenue opportunities with minimal additional expenses to the DCI or the individual corps. Yeah, so if we open it up to those woodwinds and those other musicians that currently can't belong, that's more potential warm bodies that we can get into the corps. Those are new slots that open up. And there was part of this proposal that was talking about, not as this proposal, but they anticipate in the future then growing the maximum size of corps. Why? Well, because we want to maintain the drum line that we have. We want to maintain the percussion line that we have. We want to maintain the guard that we have. And we want to add woodwinds. We should just add a whole new line, which shouldn't come out of the numbers of the others. So we need to have larger numbers. And under the current DCI system, all of those performers are your customers, right? They're the ones paying tuition to go do this activity nowadays. So yeah, if you add to the numbers and add new people that we can bring in, then that's more money and funding that we can bring in. And how do we get that, right? So instead of having to raise tuition and dues on individual members, we just raise the number of members that a corps can have and the opportunities to bring them in. So overall, what do I think of this? Look, from the perspective of the drum and bugle corps activity, I don't think it's a good idea, right? DCI, already basically drove out and shut down the other circuits, the VFW, the American Legion programs, and a lot of the regional contests that were going on, right? We do still have DCA out there, but DCA would be left as the last and only drum and bugle corps organization, because DCI would just become another marching band organization, and it would be directly aligned with whether they coordinate with somehow, or they compete with, or subsume and become part of bands across America and other organizations like that, right? We're just not left anything more of that drum and bugle corps part of it once you do that. I mean, if it's any instrument, I'm not even required to have brass or percussion. I could show up with the strolling strings, and put on some kind of performance or show. And that's great. Musically, those are fine. It's just not drum corps, all right? Now, but on the other hand, though, I shouldn't be too surprised. And here's why. Because this is DCI we're talking about. And you got to think back to the 1970s. Why was DCI created, right? Two reasons, and we're seeing them again here. This is the same two reasons that they're proposing this policy. So it's right in line with DCI's original nature, okay? They wanted to get away from the constraints of the rule systems from the VFW and the American Legion, so they could have more artistic realm and freedom to do different things, and to get away from that very traditional military style performance that was the origins of drum and bugle corps. So that was the first one, and that's what we see right there when they're calling out, hey, this is about, marching music arts for kids, and not about any kind of historical background of what kind of instrumentation we're talking about or military heritage. The second reason that was big in the formation of DCI was funding and money. All right, and now it was a little bit different back then because part of it was, when you read up on the history of this, look, the corps that were funded by the American Legion, the VFW post, had sponsorship. They were funded by those organizations, but there were independent corps. And, you go back to that in the 70s, even into the 80s, and as drum corps dropped off in the 90s as local corps, corps performed and got paid to do it. Fire companies hired a drum corps to come play with them in a parade. All right, all kinds of organizations did that. When they went to different competitions, the prize money that was awarded was how those independent corps could afford to go, because that's all they had was whatever income they got from the thing they went to. And when they were going to the VFW and the American Legion, the only people that got money were the top slot winners. So if they went and didn't win the whole thing, or place, they didn't get anything out of it, right? All of the corps that were sponsored by the VFW and the American Legion were funded, right? So they didn't lose anything. But if you were an independent corps and you went to those big name shows at the time and didn't place, then you kind of spent all the money to go. The VFW or the American Legion got to put on a great show and keep the ticket money, and you didn't get anything out of it. So there's a funding issue there, and we're seeing that funding thing come up again about, all right, how are we going to internally fund ourselves and make that an opportunity? So this kind of is in line with DCI, and the fact that DCI has always been about expanding. How do we get more artistic freedom? How do we do different things? How do we bring this all in to put on a good, entertaining show, right? DCI has been about that. It's never been about, let's try and keep some of this historical heritage or anything about drum and bugle corps. All right, so I want to know, what do you all think? All right, go ahead down below in the comments, post, what do you think of each of these proposals? Which ones do you think are good? Which ones do you think are bad? Am I way off base on something? I can be. I'm not, the end all be all of what my opinion is. It's just my opinions. What do you think? What should DCI be doing? And I'm expecting there's going to be a lot of discussion on the any instrument thing, but maybe you got thoughts on some of the others too. So go ahead, leave some comments below. I'm going to try and get some more content like this up on this channel. And if you're just interested in some of these instruments, check out the other recordings that I've done. I'm going to have some more coming out here soon. All right, have a great day.